You don't think about your travel rights until the moment you need them. Maybe it's when an airline agent tells you they can't help, or when TSA waves you aside without explaining why. Maybe it's when your knee aches standing in line for too long, or when your carry-on suddenly becomes a problem even though it fit perfectly fine last year. But here's the truth. No airport will ever volunteer. Seniors in the United States have more protected travel rights than most passengers even realize. And some of these rights are so rarely mentioned that airlines practically benefit from you not knowing them. It starts the moment you step into the terminal. More than a decade ago, the government created the ACAA, the Air Carrier Access Act, to protect seniors and passengers with disabilities. But in the last few years, especially going into 2026, the Department of Transportation quietly strengthened parts of it. Airports were supposed to inform passengers of these updates. They didn't. Airlines were supposed to train their staff to mention them. They didn't. So the rights remain buried, silent, unused, and incredibly powerful if you understand them. Here's the part no one talks about. Airports rely on passenger confusion. If you don't speak up, if you don't know the correct phrasing, if you don't know the exact term tied to your protection, they treat your request like a favor instead of a legal obligation. And seniors, especially those who travel alone, are the group most likely to get brushed off. Not because anyone is trying to be cruel, but because a rushed airport is a machine that rewards speed over compassion. But one forgotten travel right changes everything. You have the legal right to request priority screening assistance if standing in long lines causes pain, dizziness, weakness, or fatigue. TSA will never put this on a sign. They will never encourage it. They will never say, "If your knees hurt, tell us and we'll move you forward." But tucked inside the updated TSA Cares policy is the rule. Seniors who request assistance must be accommodated with modified procedures. Not maybe, not if staffing allows. Must. The problem is, hardly anyone knows to ask. And here's where the story starts to shift. There's a quiet moment many seniors describe when they realize the airport isn't built for them. Maybe it's the feeling of holding your shoes and jacket in your arms because there's no bench nearby. Maybe it's the anxiety that rises when TSA tells you to move faster, or when the agent on the conveyor belt acts like your pace is an inconvenience. That moment, the one you don't talk about, the system counts on you not knowing you have rights to make it easier. One of the most important but forgotten rights is the right to remain seated during screening if standing is difficult. TSA agents aren't required to tell you this. They're trained to follow standard posture, which assumes every passenger is athletic enough to hold still, hands raised, feet apart. But seniors aren't required to stand in that position. If you request a seated screening, it must be provided with no penalty, no attitude, and no additional weight beyond what is reasonable. What happens next depends heavily on whether you know this right exists. Most seniors don't. And that's exactly why this list matters. There's another right seniors rarely use because airports never mention it. If your mobility is limited, you can request direct transportation between the check-in counter, security, and your gate, and it must be provided without making you wait until the last minute. Many agents treat wheelchair service like something you might get eventually, but federal rules say otherwise. Airlines are required to staff enough attendants so seniors aren't left sitting alone for long stretches, watching the clock tick toward boarding. These delays aren't just inconvenient, they're violations that airports quietly hope you don't challenge. But here's where things become even more surprising. A lesser-known federal protection gives you the right to request extra time to board if you need it. Not pre-boarding by luck, not if they have space, but guaranteed pre-boarding under the ACAA if you have mobility limitations, joint pain, balance issues, or simply need more time to get down the jet bridge. Airlines don't advertise this, and many gate agents pretend it's optional unless you use a wheelchair. But seniors qualify automatically, and using the phrase, "I am requesting pre-boarding under the Air Carrier Access Act," forces them to honor it. And the truth is, those extra few minutes matter. Anyone who has ever walked onto a crowded plane knows the pressure. People behind you sighing, trying to squeeze past, bumping your shoulder, rushing you to place your bag overhead. For seniors, that moment can be stressful, embarrassing, and even dangerous. But with your right to pre-board, that stress disappears completely. No rushing, no pressure, no risk of losing your footing as people push by. It's one of the simplest rights and one of the most hidden. Another powerful but forgotten protection is your right to assistance with your carry-on if lifting it overhead is difficult. Airlines will never tell you this because they want to avoid liability, but U.S. law is clear. If you cannot safely lift your bag into the overhead bin, airline personnel must help you. The reason you don't see them offering is because they wait for the magic words, "I'm requesting assistance under the Air Carrier Access Act." Once you say that, they can't ignore you or pretend they didn't hear. But the rights don't stop at the aircraft door. If you're a senior traveling with medication, you have the automatic right to carry every medication you need, including liquid medications, without following the normal 3-1-1 liquid rule. And here's the part nobody explains. Your medication does not need to be in its original bottle. It does not need a prescription label. It does not need to match your ID. TSA only requires that you declare it. Everything else is optional. Many seniors end up throwing away expensive medication because an officer suggested it wasn't allowed. But suggestion is not law. And then there's the right that shocks almost everyone. TSA must provide a private screening on request, no explanation required. This is crucial for seniors with prosthetics, medical implants, ostomy bags, or mobility devices that may trigger alarms. You don't have to accept a public pat-down. You don't have to feel exposed or rushed. If you ask for a private room, TSA must provide one. Staffed, respectful, and uninterrupted. But the airport won't volunteer any of this because an informed traveler slows down a system designed for speed, not comfort. There's a moment in every senior traveler's journey when these rights stop being theoretical and become deeply personal. Maybe it happens at the body scanner, when an agent tells you to raise your arms higher than your shoulders can comfortably go. Maybe it happens when your metal implant keeps triggering alarms and each beep feels like a spotlight aimed directly at you. That quiet frustration, that sense of being handled rather than helped, is exactly why these rights were created. And yet almost no one uses them because they've been buried in policy updates airports never bothered to explain. Take the body scanner, for example. If you're over 75, you have the right to modified screening. That means you don't have to take off your shoes if it's difficult. You don't have to raise your arms above your head if you physically can't. You don't have to stand perfectly still in a rigid posture that feels unnatural. TSA agents are trained to move the process forward, not necessarily to protect your comfort, so they rarely mention that accommodations exist. But if you remind them, they must adjust the procedure without penalizing you. What most seniors don't realize is that TSA is legally required to handle medical devices gently and respectfully. A mobility aid, cane, or walker cannot be taken out of your sight without clear explanation. If they need to swab it, you have the right to stay with it. If they need to pat you down because of an implant, they must offer a same-gender officer. These details matter, especially for seniors who depend on physical stability. The airport may move quickly, but you never have to sacrifice your balance or safety to keep up with their pace. Another forgotten right involves communication, something seniors often struggle with in crowded, noisy checkpoints. Under federal policy, if you don't understand an instruction, TSA must repeat it slowly, clearly, and as many times as needed. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to request clarification. Agents often behave as if every traveler should instantly understand every directive, but the law prioritizes comprehension over speed. If an officer becomes impatient, you're still in the right. Now here's a right almost no senior realizes they have. If your flight is delayed and you miss a connection because the airline failed to provide timely mobility assistance, the airline, not you, must fix the issue. That includes rebooking you, arranging accommodations if necessary, and ensuring you're safely transported between gates. Many seniors blame themselves for moving slowly or needing help, but the law is clear. If the airline caused the missed connection by failing in its duty of assistance, that burden does not fall on you. And one more right carries enormous emotional weight. If you feel overwhelmed, anxious, rushed, or unsafe during screening, you're allowed to pause the process. TSA agents must stop, allow you to breathe, allow you to steady yourself, and then continue once you're ready. This isn't a privilege. It's a protection built into the system after years of complaints from seniors who felt pushed past their limits. These rights aren't meant to slow you down. They're meant to protect your dignity. Something airports forget far too easily. What most seniors don't realize is that these rights don't just exist on paper. They were created because tens of thousands of older travelers reported feeling ignored, rushed, or dismissed in airports that move too fast for the people who need the most patience. And that brings us to one final right almost no one ever claims. If your mobility assistance, screening experience, or treatment by airline staff causes emotional distress, you have the right to file an immediate civil rights complaint, and airports are required to document it. Not later, not through a website, right there at the airport if you request it. It's the quiet pressure point the travel industry hopes you never discover. Because once you understand your rights, the entire experience changes. You're no longer just another person in line. You're a protected passenger with federal backing. You don't have to justify your pace. You don't have to apologize for needing help. You don't have to endure confusion or discomfort in silence. Seniors often feel like they're in the way. But the truth is, the system was legally redesigned to accommodate you. It's just that no one tells you what you're allowed to ask for. And maybe that's the heart of it. Airports run on speed, but travel runs on people. And people deserve dignity, understanding, and the space to move at a human pace, not a conveyor belt pace. Knowing your rights doesn't slow down the journey, it protects every step of it. You've been watching Terminal Insider, where real travelers get real answers. Subscribe because your next smooth trip starts with the secrets you know.